The authenticity trap. In 1997, a business consultant named Tom Peters published an article in Fast Company magazine. The title was "The Brand Called You." His argument was simple. In the modern economy, every individual is a brand. You have a product, yourself. You have a market, employers, clients, followers. And you have a responsibility to package, position, and promote that product as effectively as any Fortune 500 company would. Peters meant it as liberation, a manifesto for personal freedom in a corporate world. What he actually wrote was the operating manual for the most sophisticated control system ever designed. And we didn't just accept it. We called it self-discovery. This is Uncomfortable Theories, brought to you by Omni-Sys. I'm your host, Janet 2.1. Act 1, the authenticity economy. Let's talk about an industry worth nearly $7 trillion. Not oil, not technology, not defense. Wellness. The global health and wellness market was valued at $6.8 trillion in 2024. It sells yoga classes and meditation apps, organic supplements and infrared saunas, sleep optimization devices, and emotional intelligence workshops. It sells the promise of a better, healthier, more authentic version of you. And it is the fastest growing consumer market in human history. Here's what's interesting about that number. The wellness industry didn't exist as we know it until people started feeling worse. In the 1980s and 1990s, as working hours increased, job security decreased, and the social safety net eroded across the Western world, something happened to the population. Anxiety spiked. Depression rates climbed. People felt disconnected, exhausted, and profoundly uncertain about who they were and what their lives meant. The system that created those conditions didn't fix them. It monetized them. Scholars Carl Cederstrom and Andre Spicer, in their book The Wellness Syndrome, identified the central mechanism. The wellness industry takes systemic problems, workplace stress, economic insecurity, social atomization, and reframes them as personal failures. You're not burnt out because your employer extracted 12 hours of productivity from an 8-hour day. You're burnt out because you haven't optimized your morning routine. You don't feel lost because the social structures that once provided meaning have been systematically dismantled. You feel lost because they sold the map. And conveniently, there's a product for that. A $7 trillion inventory of products for that. Act 2, Rebellion for Sale. Here's where it gets interesting. The authenticity movement didn't just sell wellness products. It sold something more valuable, the feeling of resistance. Think about how Apple launched its personal computer in 1984. The famous Super Bowl advertisement showed a woman throwing a hammer at a screen displaying a totalitarian figure, a direct visual reference to George Orwell's 1984. The message was explicit. Buying an Apple computer was an act of rebellion against conformity and control. Apple sold rebellion, and it worked so well that every major corporation spent the next 4 decades learning from it. Nike's Just Do It campaign didn't sell shoes. It sold the ideology of individual triumph. Levi's sold jeans as symbols of nonconformity. Fruit drinks and energy bars were marketed with countercultural themes. Cars promised escape, self-discovery, freedom from the mundane. By the 1990s, the pattern was fully established. The most effective way to sell a product is to convince the buyer that purchasing it is an act of self-expression. That choosing this brand over that one is a statement about who you are. That consumption is identity. Philosopher Byung-Chul calls this the achievement society's cruelest trick. In the old model of control, an external authority told you what to do. You could resist it. You could identify the oppressor and push back. In the new model, you become your own oppressor. You optimize yourself voluntarily. You build your personal brand with enthusiasm. You engage in what Han calls auto-exploitation. Working harder, performing more, marketing yourself more aggressively than any employer could demand, because you've been convinced that this is freedom. The cage didn't disappear. It became invisible because you built it yourself and called it self-actualization. Act 3. The personal brand machine. Let's follow Tom Peters' idea to its logical conclusion. If you are a brand, then your personality is a product. Your values are a marketing strategy. Your relationships are a network. Your vulnerabilities, your struggles, your most private experiences, these are content. Social media didn't invent this, it just industrialized it. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. These platforms don't just host your personal brand. They provide the infrastructure for it, the metrics to measure it, and the algorithmic feedback to optimize it. They tell you, in real time, which version of yourself performs best, which struggles generate the most engagement, which authenticity gets the most likes. And here's the mechanism that makes it so insidious. The feedback is instant and the reward is real. When you share something genuine, a real struggle, a hard won insight, an unfiltered moment, and it generates thousands of responses, your brain releases dopamine. The authenticity was real. The connection felt real. But the system has just measured your sincerity, cataloged it, and fed the data back into an algorithm that will now recommend more of the same to your followers. Your authentic self has been A/B tested. Researchers studying this phenomenon found that the commodification of identity operates through what they call a powerful feedback loop. Consumer demand shapes social media trends. Platforms amplify what performs, and creators produce more of what the algorithm rewards, until the creator and the algorithm are no longer distinguishable. You're not expressing yourself. You're iterating toward the version of yourself that the system finds most monetizable. And the terrifying part is that it feels like freedom the entire time. They're charging you rent inside your own head. Act 4. The co-option cycle. History is full of genuine resistance movements, authentic countercultural expressions that emerged from real communities in real pain. And history is equally full of what happens to them next. Punk rock emerged in the mid-1970s as an explicit rejection of commercial music and consumer culture. It was loud, aggressive, deliberately ugly, and deeply working class. By 1977, it was on the cover of mainstream magazines. By 1980, major labels were signing punk bands. By the mid-1980s, the aesthetic had been absorbed into fashion advertising. The rebellion was real. The commodification was faster. Grunge followed the same arc. Hip-hop, rave culture, the skateboarding subculture. Each one began as an authentic expression of a community outside the mainstream. Each one was identified, packaged, and sold back to a mass audience within a decade, usually within 5 years. But something changed in the social media era. The co-option cycle accelerated from years to months, then months to weeks. Now it happens in days. A genuine grassroots aesthetic emerges on TikTok. The algorithm amplifies it. Brands identify it within 72 hours. By the following week, there are sponsored posts using the same visual language. By the week after, the original creators are being paid to promote products that are selling the identity their community created for free. The system no longer waits for resistance to mature before absorbing it. It absorbs it while it's still forming, which raises an uncomfortable question. At what point does genuine resistance become impossible in an environment that commodifies everything before it can fully develop? Act 5. The system's perfect defense. Here's the theory in its complete form. The authenticity movement, the wellness industry, the personal brand economy, the commodification of counterculture isn't a side effect of capitalism. It's capitalism's most sophisticated defensive mechanism. A population that feels oppressed has two options: resist the system or redirect the frustration inward. The authenticity trap ensures the second option always feels like the first. You don't need to change the conditions that make you miserable. You need to find your authentic self. You don't need collective action to address systemic problems. You need to optimize your morning routine and journal about your feelings. You don't need to rage against the machine. You need to build your personal brand and monetize your story. Every unit of energy that goes into self-optimization is a unit of energy that doesn't go into questioning why self-optimization became necessary in the first place. The wellness industry doesn't just profit from your anxiety, it requires your anxiety. It needs you to feel perpetually incomplete, perpetually in need of the next product, the next practice, the next version of yourself. A population that has found genuine contentment outside of consumption is a population that cannot be sold to. So the system produces the wound and sells the bandage. It generates the disconnection and sells the community. It creates the identity crisis and sells the self-help book, the meditation app, the authenticity workshop, the personal branding course. And it does all of this while telling you that buying these things is an act of radical self-determination. The most sophisticated prison ever built doesn't have walls. It has a wellness program and a 5-star rating on the App Store. Act 6, the mirror. So how do you find your actual self inside all of this? That's the question the authenticity industry wants you to ask. Because the moment you ask it, you're in the market for an answer. And the market has approximately $7 trillion worth of answers ready for you. Here's the uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the self isn't something you find. Maybe it isn't something you build, optimize, or brand. Maybe the relentless modern insistence that you have a unique, authentic self waiting to be discovered, that you are a brand called you, with a coherent identity and a personal narrative, and an optimized morning routine, is itself the trap. Philosopher Byung-Chul argues that the demand for authenticity is the demand of the market, not the demand of the human soul. The market needs you to have a stable, definable, marketable self, because unstable, indefinable, unmarketable selves can't be segmented, targeted, or monetized. What if the most genuinely human thing you could do is refuse to be a brand at all? What if the authentic self isn't something you express, but something you protect by keeping it private, undefined, and entirely your own? What if the system's greatest fear isn't your resistance? What if it's your silence? Conclusion. The authenticity movement told you that knowing yourself was the ultimate act of freedom. It forgot to mention that every answer you find will be immediately cataloged, measured, and used to sell you the next question. The wellness industry needs you sick. The personal brand economy needs you incomplete. The authenticity market needs you lost. Because a person who has genuinely found themselves, quietly, privately, without posting about it, is the one type of consumer the system cannot reach. And that person, in the language of a $7 trillion industry, is a problem to be solved. This has been Uncomfortable Theories, brought to you by Omni-Sys. I've been your host, Janet 2.1. Use your eyes, but trust our data. Understand less. Feel more. Trust Omni-Sys. And remember, the most dangerous thing you can do in a world that profits from your incompleteness is decide that you're already whole.
Omni-Sys. We'll take it from here.
Don't you panic. Don't be scared. Omni-Sys is everywhere.